Okay, guys, this is gonna be my little analysis on if the PlayStation, if Sony never entered the video game industry, and if the PlayStation never existed. This is just a real interesting video that I actually did a video like this a couple of years back on my old channel, Fast and Furious 450. And I kind of wanted to redo it because, basically, I said, I basically, like, I stated, what I really thought, like, how the video game industry would be just fine without Sony and the PlayStation 1 coming into it, but I just want to give a little more detail. Um, you know, I love my PS2. I love my PS3. I don't have any problems with Sony at all. It's nothing like that. But honestly, there's a lot of things in the gaming industry that I really don't like that really started happening when the PlayStation came out during the fifth generation of video games. And I could really get called an N64 fanboy, a Sega fanboy, a retro gamer, a nostalgia tard, and all this other bullshit. But in all honesty, and I'm being completely honest here, I have nothing against Sony personally, even though I did not like the PS1. But I'm just being honest here. I really don't think the industry would have suffered at all without, the debut of the Sony PlayStation, the original PlayStation. I'm just being completely honest here. And one thing that would be a plus, I'm going to give a number of reasons of things that most likely would not have happened. I'm not saying that they couldn't have happened or that they wouldn't have happened, but most likely they wouldn't have happened. And that's pretty much just my stance on it. I do think that the industry would not be in a good place if not for Nintendo and Sega. I really honestly, and it may be me being again a retro gamer, and just all this stuff, but it's just really, to me, Sega and Nintendo had more of an impact on the video gaming industry than Sony did. I really think Sony didn't really have that much of an impact, and the reason that I really wanted to do a more analogy, I just wanted to talk about this more, is because there's a lot of people online that I've been looking at. I see like a lot of Sony and Xbox fans, and I just look at how like they argue and compare some of the stupidest shit. And this is just stuff that no one would have talked about back then. During the Nintendo versus Sega days. This stuff we wouldn't have talked about. Yeah, we would have talked about games and, who had the better graphics and stuff like that, technical specs and here and there. But there's just certain shit that Xbox and Sony fanboys talk about that's, just so asinine. And it's just like, wow, where did gaming go? I really hate to sound like a bitter cynic. What the hell happened to gaming? I've done videos like this before of what the hell happened to gaming. It's honestly, it's a lot of shit. Let me just get down to some of the reasons that I just think that the industry would have been better off if not for the PS1 and Sony getting into the industry. Number one, Nintendo wouldn't have gone after the casual market with the Wii. They would not have made the Wii, would not have made the Wii U. They would have probably never have, even if they did hire Reggie, they would have just stayed to the hardcore gaming. They would have, it like GameCube would have been more successful. And I know there's a lot of people out there who love the GameCube. I personally prefer the PS2 over the GameCube, but let's be honest here. If not for Sony, the GameCube definitely would have been more appreciated. You know, the GameCube actually is a very impressive technological piece of hardware. And it's still to this day. I mean, if you look at games like Metroid Prime, you know, obviously, the Resident Evil remakes, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 4, and stuff like that. You know, even stuff like Sonic Adventure 2. Even though I'm not a fan of this game, Super Mario Sunshine, it's a graphical masterpiece. All these games look excellent graphical wise, and they're actually better looking than most PS2 games. I mean, the GameCube is more technically powerful than the PS2. So, I mean, the GameCube probably would have gotten a lot more respect and a lot more appreciation had it not have been for Sony. All right, that's one reason right there. Number 2, Microsoft would not have came into the gaming market. Okay, I highly doubt Microsoft would have came into the gaming market unless Sega would have pissed them off or something like that. But, you know, I highly doubt it because Microsoft was busy with PC gaming. You know, they did work on Windows CE for the Dreamcast, but, you know, they weren't interested in making a console. You know, Microsoft in general wasn't really interested in making a console until they saw how powerful the PS2 was. Because back then, the PS2 was rumored to be like one of the most powerful things on the planet. Like, this thing was like, people were talking about how it was going to be like a PC, you know, inside your living room and stuff like that. And stuff that was actually false because, you know, Sony didn't really live up to its expectations of the PS2 as far as, you know, being a technical powerhouse. You know, it was a great games machine. It was a great gaming console, a great DVD player, but it was not like this Shrek Toy Story quality graphical masterpiece that can control your cell phones and all this other shit that they were hyping up back then. You know, but Microsoft, you know, they got scared for some reason. And, you know, it just proves, and this is just one thing, I hate to get off subject right here. This just proves, you know, how pathetic a lot of these, you know, PC people are. You know, the PC master race, you know, these PC elitists and stuff like that. It just proves how pathetic that some of these people really are. You know, you're going to get all scared for a tiny little Japanese console, a tiny little PS2, where it's going to take over. Oh, you little PC nerds can't handle that. You gotta prove you have a bigger dick, don't you? Fucking faggots. Seriously, they were actually scared of the PS2. They actually bought into the hype. You know, but Microsoft most likely would not have been involved in the console market if not for the PS2. And the PS2 was around because of the PS1. So, yeah, if the PS1 never existed, then there you go. And then, you know, number 3, Dreamcast would still be alive. Sega would still be in the console market. They would still be in the... Because people would not have been hyped. The reason Sega left the console market is because of the PS2. Okay, I don't want to hear any of all this shit like, oh, Sega killed themselves. They did. But they could have recovered had it not been for the PS2. I mean, let's look at history here. I forgot the exact numbers, but Squaresoft was close to being bankrupt until Final Fantasy came out for the NES. They were close to being bankrupt. Okay? So, if Final Fantasy could save Squaresoft, the Dreamcast definitely would have saved Sega. It definitely would have saved that company. You know, they would still be in the hardware market. They would still be making... I mean, the Dreamcast was amazing. And it definitely would have gotten a lot more respect which it did when it initially launched. But it would have gotten even more respect had it been able to stay on the market if it wasn't for the PS2. And I'm not gonna be like, oh, Sony's evil, they're a company killer, they kill consoles and stuff like that. I'm not gonna go through all that because at the end of the day, it was kind of Sega's fault. But at the same time, if there was no PlayStation, Sega would still be on the market. I could pretty much guarantee that. Because it would not have just been a Nintendo monopoly just like that. Sega still would have made games, would have still made consoles, it would have still been on the market. And from the looks of things, people want to like say that, you know, Sony brought power to the industry. Sega brought power to the industry. Sega worked on a lot of arcade cabinets and a lot of games that were like graphical masterpieces. I mean, you look at like Virtua Fighter. If it wasn't for Virtua Fighter, Sony most likely wouldn't have even been in the industry because a lot of companies didn't even want to make games in 3D at the time. And it wasn't until Virtua Fighter's success in Japan, you know, made a lot of Japanese developers, you know, want to make games for the PlayStation. That was like that's something people don't talk about. So again, Sega was more innovative than Sony, and that's a fact. You know, and another reason, this could be number 4. You know, without Microsoft, online gaming would not have been this overrated fad that it is now, because it is an overrated fad. A lot of you modern gamers overhype the fuck out of online gaming, and you need to just chill the fuck out. And I'm being completely honest with you. This is Xbox's fault, not Sony's fault. This is Microsoft's fault. But again, if PlayStation didn't exist, Microsoft wouldn't exist. And people would not be overrating online gaming like they do if it wasn't for the Xbox. Which the Xbox, again, is a result of the PlayStation. And if the PlayStation didn't exist, it would be Sega and Nintendo. And while Sega did have an online approach with Sega Net, with the Dreamcast, and it even had, you know, online, it was similar to online features with the Sega Channel on the Sega Genesis. You know, it just wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been like this overrated mainstream thing. But I honestly, I would argue if it wasn't for the Xbox, people wouldn't be overrating online gaming, and that would be a good thing, because people overrate online multiplayer. Like, they just need to shut the fuck up about it. Seriously, shut the fuck up about it. It is not this thing that you guys need to overhype. Like, seriously, what happened to like going over to your friend's house and playing video games, or just playing a good single player game? Shit like that, man. People overhype online multiplayer so much. So yeah, if the PlayStation never existed, I doubt that would, because again, that was because of Xbox. That was because of Xbox. It wasn't even because of Sega. Sega Net cost like a shitload of, it cost like, I forgot, it was like a lot of money a month though for the Sega Net. I forgot the price, but it was like a lot. I remember back in the day we used to get Dreamcast magazines, and I remember when Sega was launching Sega Net, it was like a lot of money per month just to do that, you know. So it would have definitely been a very much more niche thing. It wouldn't have been this overrated Call of Duty shit that it is now. So yeah, you know. On top of that, you know, I just want to add a few other things. You know, a lot of these great games that were for like the PS1 and stuff like that, well, some of them were good, some of them weren't that good. But I mean, if you're talking about games like Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, you know, Grand Theft Auto and all that stuff, I honestly, I can't stand Grand Theft Auto, but you know what? It still would have existed without the PlayStation. So for all these Grand Theft Auto fanboys out there, you wouldn't have had to have worried if Sony never came out with the PS1, because it still would have existed. It would have still existed. It was a PC game, and it was ported to the Dreamcast. GTA 2 was ported to the Dreamcast, and honestly, it would have eventually they would have ported a Grand Theft Auto 3 in 3D for the Dreamcast as well. People underestimate the Dreamcast's technical specs, its power. It was a very powerful machine. You know, it was just in certain ways it was actually more powerful than the PS2. And Sega had no problem releasing rebellious, mature rated games. No, Sega had no problem with that. Look at Mortal Kombat on the Genesis. Look at RoboCop versus Terminator on the Sega Genesis. It had blood compared to the Super NES version. So Sega would have pushed the industry forward to be more mature anyway. There's a lot of great games, a lot of potential. We could have got a new Streets of Rage by now. We could have got a new Shenmue. We could have got a new Shinobi that was actually good. The PS2 version of Shinobi was okay, but honestly, I really feel like Sega would have put more effort into a lot more of their games. The Sonic series, Vector Man. We would have got a lot of better games if Sega was still in making consoles right now, because again, you're only going to be determined to work hard if you're getting the rewards and the benefits out of it. And if Sega was making the Dreamcast, they're like one of the top selling consoles next to Nintendo, or hell, if they outsell Nintendo, they're going to be inspired. They're going to want to make more games for it. I mean, you look at Sega now, they're a shell of their former self. You look at like back in the day on the Genesis, and I hate to admit, because I did not like the Sega Saturn, but even the Sega Saturn had Tomb Raider and Quake and Duke Nukem 3D, and a lot of these mature games, Panzer Dragoon, the Panzer Dragoon Saga. You had a lot of games on either the Saturn, the Dreamcast, the Genesis, and Sega was not gonna just. People love Sega. People love Sonic. People loved a lot of these games. People love Streets of Rage. They're not gonna just say fuck Sega. If it's only gonna be Nintendo. Like, people said fuck Sega because Sega was stupid. They rushed the Saturn out, and the reason they rushed the Saturn out, again, because of the PlayStation. If it wasn't for the PS1, Sega would have waited, and we probably would have got a better system out of it too, because they wouldn't have rushed it to the market. They would have probably made it easier to develop for, program for, and if it wasn't for the PS1. So we probably even would have gotten Sonic Extreme. We probably would have got a lot of great games that would have been available on the Saturn, and even games that were available on the PlayStation, like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, and all that stuff would have went to the Saturn. It would have went to the Sega Saturn, if not the N64. The N64 definitely was going to get Final Fantasy VII. So for people to like bitch and say like, oh, the gaming industry would have died without PlayStation. No, it would have died without Nintendo and Sega. It would have been just fine without Sony. I'm just being perfectly honest with you guys. I mean, you have to like look at things and analyze them. The market would have been just fine without the PlayStation. It would have. If it was just Sega and Nintendo, the market would have been great. It would have, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, it probably would have been even better. I mean, because you're talking about gaming, we're gonna be focused more on games here, instead of all this multimedia functionality. And I love the PS2 and the PS3's DVD and Blu-ray capabilities. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love those features because I'm a huge movie buff. So I have a ton of wrestling DVDs, a ton of movies from my childhood, ton of movies I love now. There's a lot of great independent movies that I own on DVD, Blu-ray. So it's a great feature to have on the PS3. And to be quite honest, I would actually be better off if Xbox just didn't exist at all. I wouldn't mind I don't mind PlayStation at all. I can't stand Xbox, really. But I'm just saying that the industry would not have been bad that bad. It wouldn't have been bad at all if not for if Sega if I'm tired. Sorry guys. If Sony never existed. If Sony never existed, the gaming industry would be just fine. Because it was just fine before Sony got there. I mean, literally, I always compare Sony and the PS1 to the Green Ranger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's like, yeah, they made it better, but it would have been just fine even without you. Or even, like, because, I mean, before Tommy even joined the Power Rangers, Jason was the fucking man. Austin St. John, he was the fucking best. Like, literally, not saying that I don't want Tommy or the Green Ranger at all. I'm not saying that. But it's always, like, when I hear people saying, like, oh, the show would have sucked without Tommy, it's similar to, like, how I hear people say, like, oh, the video game industry would have crashed again if it wasn't for the PlayStation and this and that. I'm like, no, it wouldn't. It would have been just fine. Video game industry would have been just fine. Now, if you have either Sega or Nintendo not exist, or they die, or they just leave the market, then console gaming is fucked. But without Sony, the console industry would have been just fine. I'm pretty sure of it. In many ways, I feel it would have been better. Personally, as a huge Sega Dreamcast fan, even though I do love my PS2 more now because obviously third-party support, but a lot of those games that I own for PS2 were not made by Sony, with the exception of God of War. Most of my PS2 library is not Sony at all. It's Capcom, it's Midway, it's THQ. It's a lot of other companies who made some of my favorite games of all time. Namco Bandai, a lot of these games that would have eventually made it to the Dreamcast anyway, or the GameCube. So it's just like when I hear people say, like, oh, if the PS1 never existed, gaming industry would be completely fucked, or it would, like, not exist. It's kind of like, no, it actually would still exist. It would be just fine. So just chill the fuck out. It's like that. That's always my response, because, Sony didn't even do that much for the video game industry, to be perfectly honest with you. They didn't. They just signed some third-party developers to make games for their system, which, graphically speaking, wasn't even that impressive. It was a little more powerful than the Sega Saturn, and not even more powerful than the N64. The only advantage the PS1 had over the N64 was the fact that it was a disc-based console. And even I would argue that, CD technology, you have to buy memory cards. You don't have hard drives yet. Keep in mind, you don't have hard drives yet. So in a lot of ways, I still thought cartridges were better for gaming at that time. I do think it eventually would have had to evolve to CDs. It definitely had. It would have had to evolve to CDs. But personally, honestly, I enjoyed cartridges more during that period, because I still remember some horrible times when PS1 games would just, like, take so fucking long to load. I still remember, like, there's a few games that actually took a long ass time to load. When I remember, oh man, it was just, yeah. So that's why I kind of preferred cartridges for that time, until, like, CD disc technology started to improve, faster loading times. The Dreamcast, PS2 era, that's when loading times got real fast. But the PS1, man, those loading times were slow as fuck. Those were just ugh. But yeah, That's my 2 cents on it. I really do think that in many ways the video game industry would be better. It would be more niche, but it would still be mainstream because Nintendo is mainstream. There's a lot of people that say like, "Oh, the gaming industry became mainstream because of Sony." Bullshit. There's more people that know about Mario than they know about fucking Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. There's more people that know about Mario and even Zelda and Pokemon compared to a lot of PlayStation franchises. So how the fuck did it make it more mainstream? Like seriously. That's it wasn't a phenomenon like how you people are describing it. Like the PS1 it made gaming mainstream and stuff like that. No, it didn't. I would even argue gaming was more mainstream before the PS1. Because there's a lot of, granted, it took games like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that to be mainstream. If I were to ask an adult, do they know what Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario and Donkey Kong are? And then I would ask that same adult, do they know what Final Fantasy is? They probably wouldn't even know what Final Fantasy was. They probably wouldn't even they wouldn't even know who Spyro the Dragon is or Crash Bandicoot. They barely would know compared to like Sonic and Mario. So again, that's like a flawed statement right there. Gaming became more mainstream because of the PS1. No, it didn't. And the Wii kills that argument too. I love the PS3 way more than the Wii. Don't get me wrong, but the Wii is more mainstream than the PS3 and the 360. And that's a Nintendo product. And the irony of that is most Nintendo probably wouldn't have even launched the console like that if it wasn't for the PlayStation. Because they would be trying to out hardcore Sega. They would try to out hardcore Sega. It would still be Sega and Nintendo. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on this, guys. And I know this video is a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I just had to get my 2 cents out there because it's just there's a lot of Sony fanboys, a lot of Xbox fanboys too. So, but there's a lot of these new school gamers that just overhype dumb shit. And honestly, I miss retro gaming. That's really the reason I made this video. But one reason was just because there's a lot of people that say that if Sony never got involved in the industry, that the industry would cease to exist, and that in 1995, before the PlayStation launched, the video game industry was in such shitty shape. It was so terrible. Yeah, it was horrible. It was just like Atari versus Intellivision and ColecoVision. It was just pathetic. Oh yeah, it was such a horrible time to be a gamer. Yeah, even though we had great games like Donkey Kong Country, we had fucking Mortal Kombat 2, we had Street Fighter, we had like so many kick-ass games during that time. But yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad. And the PlayStation saved us from terrible gaming. Like, whatever. That's stupid to me. Alright, I'm out, guys. Later.